I was the poorest, I pretended to be my sister to take care of her blind fiancé for $500,000. The day he regained his sight, I left without saying goodbye. When we met again, it was at a business interview. I was an unknown intern reporter. He had regained his status, becoming the young master in charge of the Tilney Group. A reporter was interviewing him.
I heard that during your illness, it was thanks to your fiancée, Miss Horler, who stayed by your side. Are you two getting married soon?
He slightly curled his lips, raised his hand to show the ring.
Yes, we are getting engaged.
But his gaze, through his glasses, seemed to fall on me in the corner, intentionally or unintentionally. Before the interview started, the room was buzzing with chatter.
The young master being interviewed today is the head of the entire Tilney Group. I heard he went blind 5 years ago and was even kicked out of the Tilney family. If it weren't for his fiancée taking care of him, he might not have made it. SHH, keep it down.
I sat on the side, barely maintaining a smile. My nails dug deep into my palms. Suddenly, my senior colleague, Robert, turned his head.
Aileen, go get me a glass of water.
Just as I reached the water dispenser at the door, the main door suddenly opened. A familiar figure came into view, and my mind went blank. In 3 years, the changes in Denzel Tilney were almost earth-shattering. The once slightly thin young man had grown tall, his facial features more defined and sharp. The eyes that used to be misty were now cold and clear.
Excuse me.
He spoke lightly, his gaze passing over me through the glasses, as if looking at a stranger. There was no pause. He walked onto the stage surrounded by several bodyguards. As he passed by me, a faint woody fragrance wafted through the air. I stood frozen, delayed for a few seconds before suddenly reacting. The 2 years I spent by his side were when Denzel was at his lowest. He had been kicked out of the Tilney family, and his eyes were blind due to a car accident, so of course, he didn't know what I looked like. This is good. When I returned with the water, the interview had already started. Denzel sat on the stage, fingers intertwined under his chin, calmly observing the audience. He was answering those business questions. Suddenly, the side door of the stage opened. Georgia Horler walked in, smiling as she complained to Denzel.
Sorry, Denzel. There was some issue on the set, so I'm late.
She lifted the hem of her luxurious champagne-colored dress and sat beside Denzel. The room fell silent for a moment, and the atmosphere immediately became buzzing and ambiguous. Robert, holding his glass of water, glanced at me as if he had discovered something new.
Aileen, you do look a bit like Georgia Horler.
I pressed my lips together and forced a smile.
She's a movie star, you're flattering me too much.
Of course, we look alike. Because she and I are sisters.
I heard that during your illness, it was thanks to Miss Horler by your side that you remained steadfast. Are you two getting married soon?
My throat suddenly tightened as I looked at Denzel on the stage. He curled his lips slightly and raised his hand to reveal the ring finger of his left hand. On it was a simple silver ring. It was the one I had bought part-time all those years ago to cheer him up. The distinguished young master of the Tilney family wore such a cheap ring, looking out of place. Yet he seemed unaware, gently brushing his fingertips over it.
Yes, she and I are about to get engaged.
As he spoke, his gaze swept across the audience. Deliberately or not, it landed on me in the corner. It only stayed for a few seconds before moving away. The microphone was then handed to Georgia Horler.
Miss Horler, I heard that you are currently filming a movie by director White. He rarely uses new actors. Is there any influence from Mr. Tilney in this?
She admitted with a smile.
Of course. I have always been very confident in my professional skills, but I don't deny that Denzel has done a lot for me. And I completely deserve this favoritism.
Her poised attitude instead won her the admiration of many. Someone asked.
Can you tell us about the time when you and Mr. Tilney supported each other through your lows?
The smile on George's lips suddenly froze. In the eerie silence, time seemed to slow down. After a long while, Denzel chuckled softly and took the microphone.
There's nothing much to say. The memories between her and me are enough for just the two of us to know.
My eyes suddenly stung, and I clenched the pen in my hand, lowering my head in a bit of a panic. As soon as I closed my eyes, I would think of the past. Denzel, in his youth, offended many people due to his rebellious nature. After he fell from grace, some people came specifically to cause trouble. To protect him, I was pushed down the steps and ended up covered in blood. Those people were scared and ran away, shoving each other. I gritted my teeth and stood up, pretending nothing had happened, and walked back to his side.
Let's go home.
But Denzel suddenly grabbed my hand.
You're hurt. We need to go to the hospital.
I'm not.
I can smell the blood.
His voice suddenly rose, and tears rolled down from his misty eyes, like stars covered in dust. The young man's not-so-broad shoulders tightly embraced me. He spoke, but called out my sister's name.
Georgia. When I recover, I will give you the grandest wedding in the world.
After the interview ended, the sky darkened. Outside the venue, the rain was falling steadily. Robert patted his pocket and started ordering me around again.
Aileen, the memory card was left inside. Go back and get it.
I stepped on the wet ground and jogged back. The elevator number jumped to 1. The next second, the door opened. I ran into 2 people inside. Georgia was slightly tilting her head, talking to Denzel about some trivial matters on the set. Although his expression was indifferent, he listened patiently. They seemed close. Seeing me, Georgia's expression immediately turned extremely unpleasant.
Sorry.
I mumbled an apology, turned around, and planned to take the stairs. But Denzel spoke behind me.
Stop.
I froze in place.
Aren't you going to use the elevator? Go up.
I turned around slowly, deliberately lowering my voice.
Thank you, Mr. Tilney.
He told me to use the elevator but didn't move aside, just stared at me.
Are you also a reporter for today's interview? Why didn't I hear your questions?
I lowered my eyes.
Mr. Tilney, I just graduated and returned to the country. I'm still an intern reporter, not qualified to ask questions.
I see.
He responded faintly, not sure what he was thinking. Georgia glared at me viciously and said,
Let's go, Denzel, we have to meet Director White and the others tonight.
Denzel finally looked away.
Let's go.
I stood alone in the ascending elevator, lost in thought. After my parents divorced, my father took Georgia and climbed up to the Horler family, becoming a live-in son-in-law. Since I could remember, I hadn't seen Georgia. 5 years ago, she suddenly found me.
I'll give you $500,000 to take my place and look after someone for me.
At that time, my mother had passed away due to illness, and our family owed a lot of money. I had no other choice but to agree. Only when we met did I realize that the person she wanted me to take care of was Denzel, the young master of the Tilney family. He was also her fiancé, who had just gotten engaged when an accident happened.
A blind man and an abandoned child of a wealthy family who would want to take care of him.
She looked disgusted.
If it weren't for my reputation, I would have broken off the engagement long ago.
At that time, Georgia had just started her career. She had taken on a good role, and her career was on the rise. Afraid of being called heartless, she handed this tough job to me. Denzel had lived smoothly for 18 years, suddenly facing a huge setback. His temper became very bad. During the initial period of taking care of him, I was always ridiculed by his cold words. I took the money to do the job and never retorted. Until that day, I went to the cemetery to visit my mother and returned a bit late. He started venting his bad temper again.
Georgia Horler, stop acting in front of me. Don't think I don't know. You actually despise me. You're just afraid of what others would say.
He couldn't finish his sentence. Because I suddenly lowered my head and kissed him. Actually, that was my first kiss, completely unskilled, and with a bit of thin anger, it was more like a beast gnawing. Denzel suddenly quieted down. Even his ears turned completely red.
You.
With a bit of malice, I bit his lip again. Then I backed away a little, holding his shoulders, breathing heavily.
Can you feel it? Do you still think I despise you?
I took the memory card downstairs to find Robert. He was very satisfied.
Aileen, you're quite diligent just in time. There's a dinner party tonight. I'll take you to meet some people. As a journalist, connections are very important.
I quickly thanked him. As a result, when we arrived, I saw a familiar black Rolls-Royce in the parking lot. I froze.
Mr. Tilney, is he here tonight too?
Robert turned around and winked at me.
The dinner I'm taking you to is hosted by Mr. Tilney. Aileen, don't underestimate my connections.
It was too late to regret now. I could only brace myself and follow him inside. Fortunately, the private room was large. We small-time reporters were not seated at the same table as Denzel. Robert introduced me to many industry veterans.
This is our company's newcomer this year, a smart young lady named Aileen Swales. Aileen, come and greet everyone.
As a newcomer, it was inevitable to toast. By the end, I was dizzy and could only apologize before rushing to the restroom with my mouth covered. I vomited until the world spun. I rinsed my mouth and splashed my face with cold water, then walked out. The corridor lights were dim. A familiar figure stood in the shadows by the window. My heart pounded a few times. I originally planned to pretend I didn't see him and just walk back. Just as I took a step, Denzel spoke behind me. His voice was deep, each word laced with countless complex emotions.
Aileen Swales.
My steps froze instantly. I swallowed hard, hearing footsteps approaching unhurriedly. Instinctively, I closed my eyes. The footsteps stopped in front of me, the familiar presence inching closer. I opened my eyes and saw his deep, ocean-like eyes.
Hi, Mr. Tilney.
My throat tightened with nerves, and I whispered.
How did you know my name?
He didn't speak, just looked at me for a moment before standing up straight again.
Your senior took you around to toast. Everyone in the room knows your name now.
Thinking of Robert's loud voice, my face suddenly felt hot.
I'm sorry, my senior is very kind to newcomers, maybe a bit overenthusiastic. If we disturbed you, Mr. Tilney, I apologize.
I tried to explain. Afraid of implicating Robert, I even apologized on his behalf. But Denzel remained silent. Under the warm yellow light, he squinted slightly, looking at me with a half-smile.
In Miss Swales' eyes, do I seem like a very petty person?
I lowered my head and muttered.
I didn't mean that.
The next second, a gold-embossed business card was handed to me.
You're still an intern, right? There's a job opportunity. Want to try?
When I returned, my head was still a bit dizzy. As soon as I walked in, Robert pulled me aside.
Are you okay, Aileen?
I rubbed my aching stomach and whispered.
Sorry, Robert, I've had stomach surgery before, I can't drink much.
He frowned, about to say something. His eyes glanced down, landing on the gold-embossed business card in my hand. He widened his eyes in disbelief.
Is that Mr. Tilney's personal business card?
I nodded, thinking of the scene just now. This was the legendary, incredibly valuable card that allowed direct contact with him. I couldn't accept it without reason. I raised my eyes warily, not forgetting to disguise my voice.
Why would Mr. Tilney give such a precious opportunity to an obscure little reporter like me?
He slightly curled his lips.
Maybe I find you pleasing to the eye.
That was a very Denzel reason. During the 2 years I took care of him, I gradually became familiar with Denzel. He would show some rebellious little tempers in front of me. For example, at certain moments. I gritted my teeth, swallowing the faint sounds between my lips, grabbing his hair.
You can't see, don't move around.
Under the dim light, the young man slightly raised his head. The soft bangs brushed over his unfocused eyes. He licked his lips, his fingers pressing lightly on my neck. He said softly,
But my other places are good. So, you need to be louder. Let me hear.
I came back to my senses, making up a random excuse to deal with Robert. The next day, when I returned to the company, the leader called me over. He kindly said,
Aileen, prepare yourself for the popular live emotional variety show. You'll participate as a special observer.
When I started working, the next episode was to interview Georgia and Denzel. After the interview that day, their engagement news prominently appeared on the trending list. As the show's promotional warm-up, fans in the comments section were going crazy.
From walking through the lows together to meeting at the peak, what a beautiful love story.
I heard the Horler family company was struggling, but with the strong support of Tilney Group, it's thriving again.
A power couple, you'd be crazy not to ship them.
I skimmed through the comments and closed the section. The host, Mandy, was confirming the script while chatting with me.
If we can dig up the specific story of Mr. Tilney and his fiancée from those 2 years, the show would be a hit.
I gripped the pen in my hand tightly and softly agreed. No one knew those 2 years and every detail better than I did. But I couldn't say a word. Georgia, leveraging the resources and connections of the Tilney family, is now a top-tier celebrity. As the show began, the live stream was packed with over 1 million viewers. Under the spotlight, I heard Mandy speak.
I heard Mr. Tilney and Georgia are already discussing marriage. Could you share your journey together?
Georgia turned to look at him, smiling faintly.
I never believed those malicious rumors about him. In my eyes, Denzel has always been the one I love the most.
She gazed at him with deep affection. Her eyes were so tender they seemed to glisten. Denzel, however, lowered his eyelashes and smiled.
Liar! When I first lost my sight, do you remember how much you despised me?
Georgia was momentarily stunned. She glanced at me with a flash of malice in her eyes. But in front of the camera, she could only maintain her smile.
I don't really remember. Maybe as our relationship grew, I only remembered the sweet moments of our love.
I glanced at the real-time comments behind me. Words like "so sweet" filled the entire screen. I put down the script, gripped the microphone, and asked Denzel.
It seems you two have some differing views. Could there be more to the story? Why not share how you both managed to reconcile?
I thought he wouldn't answer. But after a moment of silence, Denzel began to speak.
During the time when my eyesight first failed, I was very depressed, resented the entire world, and didn't like her. She would leave early and return late every day, and in between, she had to take care of me. One day, she was so busy that she got dizzy, left the fish stewing on the stove, and went downstairs to buy salt, forgetting to turn off the fire. When she came back, the kitchen was already on fire.
My throat felt like it was blocked by something. In my dazed state, I seemed to relive that evening. The heat from the flames still lingered in the air. I dragged Denzel out of the room. Grabbing his collar, I slapped him hard and asked viciously,
Do you want to die?
Both my whole body and my voice were trembling. He didn't argue with me as he usually did. Instead, he remained silent for a long time before hoarsely asking,
Wouldn't it be better if I died? Wouldn't it be a relief for you too?
It was at that moment that I suddenly realized. The once high and mighty young master of the Tilney family was now just a deflated, pretentious little dog. So, gasping for breath, I pushed him back into the room. The wall scorched by the flames was pitch black. I unbuttoned his shirt one by one, whispering,
I didn't get to have dinner, you owe me.
He seemed to realize something.
Have you thought it through?
His words were cut off by my forceful kiss.
Denzel Tilney, I never thought of you as a burden.
That night, it felt as if the whole world had turned upside down, leaving only the two of us. And now, as he brought up the past again, his close and intimate fiancée beside him was Georgia. The whole world believed that memory belonged only to the two of them. A suffocating bitterness exploded in my heart. At such a close distance, a familiar yet strange scent from Denzel enveloped me silently. Overwhelming. But it no longer belonged to me. He paused, and amid the applause of the live audience, he concluded.
I will always remember the moonlight of that night, bright enough to illuminate everything. I couldn't see, but she talked to me all night.
I clenched the pen in my hand, hurriedly lowering my head. My eyes ached. Because I improvised my questions, I uncovered many things that were previously unknown. This interview was a huge success. By the end of the show, the live stream audience had exceeded 10 million. For the first time, the public got details of the hidden past of the Tilney family's head. Everyone seemed very excited. Backstage, Mandy patted my shoulder.
You really are a journalist. Your impromptu questions were so sharp that they were impossible to avoid.
But when we turned around, Denzel and Georgia were walking over. She suddenly fell silent. Denzel glanced at me indifferently.
Were the questions today prepared by you?
I nodded. Georgia said with thinly veiled sarcasm.
Ms. Swales, you really know how to hit where it hurts. But I must remind you to adhere to basic professional ethics. Don't covet things you don't deserve.
I said nothing. I just looked at Denzel again. His expression was stern, and he merely said,
Ms. Swales is very capable. From now on, you'll be in charge of liaising with our company's media relations.
Georgia abruptly looked at me. Her eyes were filled with barely concealed fear and hatred. She cornered me in a deserted spot, her gaze wary and disgusted.
Aileen Swales, you really are insatiable. You took money from me back then, so why are you back now?
I looked at her calmly.
I graduated and came back to work.
A very ordinary statement.
Work? Aileen, do you think I'm stupid?
She suddenly went mad, throwing her bag at me.
Get lost, tell him you voluntarily give up the job, or you won't have a good day.
Her Hermes bag hit the ground, the chain pulling open, spilling its contents everywhere. I ignored her and turned to leave. Georgia meant what she said. Suddenly, I started to face obstacles everywhere. Several job opportunities that should have been mine were taken by others at the last minute. That evening before leaving work, my boss suddenly called me into the office.
Next month, there's an important annual development conference. You will be the host.
I was momentarily stunned, then he said,
It's Mr. Tilney's specific request.
after work. Across the street from the office, a very familiar Rolls-Royce was parked. The window rolled down, revealing Denzel's indifferent face.
Ms. Swales, since you're so curious about my past, why not ask me directly?
I lowered my head.
I have no intention of prying into Mr. Tilney's privacy, it was just for work.
Even if it's for work, I gave you my private business card. You could have contacted me directly.
I pressed my lips together.
No need.
At that moment, I suddenly realized it had been 3 years. He was now the powerful Mr. Tilney. Not that hot-tempered little dog, who would cling to me for kisses and comfort after being scolded. The Horler family had already declined. Without Denzel's consent and indulgence, Georgia would never dare to target me so openly. Perhaps. To him, that past was a disgrace, something he didn't want to revisit. I turned to leave. But Denzel called out to me.
Stop.
He pushed open the car door, took a long stride, and blocked my path.
Ms. Swales, can we talk?
I clutched my bag to my chest and asked hoarsely.
What does Mr. Tilney want to talk about?
Denzel curled his lips. His gaze at me was tinged with helplessness.
Work, can we?
In the next half-month, Denzel came to see me twice more, to verify several important decisions to be announced at the press conference. Finally, as if he suddenly remembered something, he handed me a document.
The large-scale tourism project that hasn't been announced yet is a direct collaboration with the province. You can announce it at the press conference as an exclusive scoop you uncovered.
I was silent for a moment. I took it and said thank you. Robert knew about this and kept urging me.
It seems like Mr. Tilney appreciates you. Why don't you subtly mention to him about Georgia suppressing you?
I was revising the host's script and smiled slightly.
No need. Would he really make things difficult for his fiancée because of a stranger journalist?
On the day of the press conference, the venue was packed. The seat in the center, where Denzel was supposed to sit, was empty. Amidst the flashing spotlights, I was announcing several important collaborations of the Tilney Group. Suddenly, a strange journalist stood up and loudly accused me.
Where did you steal such confidential information from?
I responded coldly.
My collaboration with the Tilney Group is entirely legitimate and through official channels.
Legitimate? Someone who uses underhanded methods to climb up the ladder dares to say that?
He shouted.
I have evidence.
Someone walked up to the stage. It was Georgia. She stared at me and sighed softly.
Aileen Swales, it's normal for a small journalist like you to be attracted to Denzel. I originally wanted to give you some face, but you really won't cry until you see the coffin.
The big screen behind me suddenly switched from a PPT to several explicit photos. And the person in the photos was me.
You sent him these photos, knocked on his hotel room door late at night in a slip dress, and there's also surveillance of you opening a room with your boss.
As she spoke, the big screen behind her changed again. At the dimly lit hotel entrance, my boss and I walked in side by side.
You, a repeat offender.
Amidst the uproar, the main hall door suddenly opened. Denzel, in a suit, strode in, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room. It also swept across my face without the slightest pause. My heart sank suddenly. The spotlight on me felt like a public execution under everyone's gaze. For a moment, the audience was abuzz with discussions.
Doing such things is a disgrace to us journalists.
How despicable, truly disgusting.
No professional ethics at all. Ban her.
I looked at no one, just stared at Denzel. Watching him look at Georgia, he said calmly.
What did you just say?
Georgia's eyes instantly reddened, tears on the verge of falling.
Denzel, you've been deceived by her. She deliberately disguised herself as an interview journalist to get close to you, just to steal confidential information from you, harming the entire Tilney group. Even this opportunity to independently host the press conference was obtained through underhanded methods.
Denzel was silent for a moment, then looked at me.
Do you have anything to say?
What do I have to say? In Georgia's gaze, I felt her hatred and satisfaction. Suddenly, it all seemed incredibly absurd. She and I were only 2 years apart. We were sisters with the same parents. After our mother passed away, I and she should have been the only ones left in this world, the closest people. I curled my lips into a mocking smile, gripped the microphone and spoke.
I want to say, Mr. Tilney, your fiancé is spouting nonsense, deliberately spreading rumors. If you love her so much that you would watch her distort the truth and fabricate facts, I will write this matter truthfully in today's press release. The public has eyes. A decision-maker who can't distinguish right from wrong can't be trusted with development projects.
Whether it was the rebellious young master from before, or the rumored decisive ruler now, hearing such an open threat should make him angry. But he just walked up the stage step by step under the lights, stood at the same height as me, facing me from a distance. He called my name softly.
Aileen.
My heart was filled with a sudden sourness. I didn't want to hear him defend Georgia anymore. I turned my head and said word by word.
All the accusations against me are baseless and fabricated. I only have professional interactions with Mr. Tilney. There is no private contact.
No contact?
Before I finished speaking, I was interrupted by Denzel's voice.
You gave me a ring, but don't intend to take responsibility for it?
I was stunned and quickly turned my head to look at him. He raised his left hand, revealing the extremely simple silver ring on his left ring finger. It was made of cheap material, and the craftsmanship was average. But because of the owner's meticulous care, it reflected a brilliant light under the lamp. This ring seemed to drag me back to memories from 4 years ago. That day was originally Denzel's 19th birthday. For the first 18 years of his life, every birthday was extravagant and lively. But this time, he was down and out, and only I was there with him. To cheer him up, I worked 2 days in between revising my thesis. With the more than $200 I earned, I bought a pair of cheap couple rings. When I got back, I grabbed his hand and put it on him. Denzel couldn't see it, but he could feel it. His ears turned red, and he tried to ask me calmly.
What is this?
I teased him.
A couple was arguing and threw their stuff on the roadside. I waited there for half a day and picked up this ring. Don't dislike it, Denzel.
His Adam's apple bobbed as he carefully held the cheap silver ring to his chest.
Even if it's picked up, I like it. Because it's from you.
He meant what he said. In the days that followed, even at our most joyous moments, he would wear that ring. He would hoarsely ask me,
Can you feel it? It's the love you gave me. Relax a bit, be careful it doesn't hurt you.
Only at those times, he would show a bit of the indulgence and recklessness unique to a young master. I snapped out of my memories. Denzel was approaching me step by step.
Speak, Aileen.
There's nothing to say.
I clutched the hem of my dress and whispered.
Mr. Tilney, you have the wrong person. Isn't this ring a token of love given to you by your fiancée, Miss Horler?
He sneered.
I never said where this ring came from. How do you know so clearly?
As he spoke, he had already stopped right in front of me. The close distance left no room to escape. Whispers rose from the audience. What does this mean? Mr. Tilney said the person who accompanied him through his lowest point was actually that little reporter? Then what about Georgia Horler? Oh God, they do look quite similar. Georgia looked at me with eyes full of hatred. But she had to soften her tone to coax Denzel.
Denzel, don't be fooled by her. This person is always full of lies. She has a history.
I closed my eyes, suppressing the surging emotions in my heart. When I opened them again, I could already look at him calmly.
Yes, I gave it to you. At that time, I needed money, so I impersonated Georgia and deceived you for 2 years. Later, I took the money and left. I've already forgotten about the past. Since from the beginning you thought that person was Georgia and have already gotten engaged to her, what's the point of correcting it now?
I couldn't continue. I swallowed the choked up words, took a few deep breaths. I put down the microphone, intending to leave. The moment I turned around, my wrist was grabbed. Skin to skin, the familiar scorching temperature came from his palm. His voice sounded low.
Of course, it matters. You said that as long as I wore the ring you gave me, no matter where I was, you would recognize me at a glance. Does that still count?
My eyelashes trembled violently. I lowered my eyes, hiding all my emotions in my voice, burying them deep in my throat. I gently pried open his fingers, pulling my hand away. When I raised my head again, my expression was indifferent.
I forgot.
I lied. Actually, during those years studying abroad, I often thought of Denzel. In the winter of his 19th year, just before returning to the Tilney family. It was the peak of our passionate love. The winter in the northern city was terribly dry, and even kissing would cause a slight sting from the static sparks. I had thought about confessing my true identity to him. There were many moments when emotions were at their strongest. He would kiss my ear and call me hoarsely.
Georgia. Georgia, don't leave me.
It was like a bucket of cold water suddenly poured over my head. At that moment, I suddenly realized. From the beginning, I came to his side with an unspeakable purpose, replacing another person. Denzel once told me,
When I was a kid, my cousin tricked me into a closet, locked the door, and I almost died inside. In this life, I hate being deceived the most.
if he knew the truth, would he hate me to the bone too? On the eve of Denzel's 20th birthday, the old man of the Tilney family had a serious illness and unexpectedly learned the truth of what happened back then. Denzel had been deliberately framed from the beginning, even the car accident was arranged. He sent people to contact Georgia, planning to take Denzel back. Georgia came to me. She was already a famous actress, looking down at me with her chin raised, arrogant and proud.
Now the Tilney family wants to acknowledge him again. You don't still dream of flying up the social ladder, do you? Stop dreaming. Whether it's the Tilney family or Denzel Tilney, they only recognize me, Georgia. From the beginning, you were just a counterfeit.
She took a check out of her bag and threw it at me.
Another $500,000 for you. Stop having unrealistic dreams. Otherwise, I'll reveal everything that happened back then.
I suddenly looked up, glaring at her.
Georgia, my mom is also your mom. My mom is the Horler family's eldest lady. What is she?
She sneered.
Just a prostitute.
That day, as the sun set, the light was blood red. I lost my mind, grabbing Georgia's collar, and punched her twice. Amid her screams, someone rushed in from outside, twisted my arm, and pinned me to the ground. The glamorous actress stood in front of me, looking down at me.
Did I say anything wrong? Take the money and obediently go abroad. Don't come back to be an eyesore. Otherwise, I'll have all her disgraceful deeds carved on her tombstone.
She left. I stared at the check that fluttered to the ground. I thought of 2 years ago. Because my mother was ill, our family borrowed a lot of money. After she passed away, I couldn't even afford a decent grave. At that time, Georgia contacted me.
Need money?
She didn't even let me finish my words before sneering.
She only raised me for a few days. She's dead now, so why should I give you money?
I thought she was holding a grudge and tried to explain.
Back then, she wanted custody of you. It was you who cried to go with Dad. Of course, I wanted to go with Dad to the Horler family. Do you think I'm as stupid as you?
Georgia's face turned cold as she interrupted me.
What, did you want to keep me there, living the same poor life as you, unable to afford a grave even after death?
I looked at Georgia in front of me. All the words stuck in my throat, unable to come out. That face, which was 6 or 7 points similar to mine, with exquisite makeup, was full of impatience and disgust. The silk dress on her body, the diamond necklace around her neck, the crocodile leather bag on her arm. Any one of them was beyond my wildest imagination. She picked up the coffee on the table, took a slow sip. Finally, she revealed her true purpose.
But, considering we are sisters, if you need money, I can give it to you. $500,000, you pretend to be me and take care of someone for me.
The press conference had turned into a farce. I could see the looks people were giving her becoming increasingly strange. Some even turned their microphones and cameras towards her.
Miss Horler, is what Mr. Tilney just said true? Was the person who accompanied him during his difficult times really not you, But that reporter, Miss Swales? Were all your accusations just fabrications?
She couldn't argue back and had to look to Denzel for help.
Denzel, you know me best. I've been with you for so many years. How could I possibly do such a thing?
Denzel looked down at her from the stage, smiling.
Don't be afraid. Didn't you say you have solid evidence? The lawyer is here, and everything today will be recorded truthfully.
His voice was gentle and soothing, as if to comfort her. But Georgia trembled as if she had seen a terrifying monster. The press conference couldn't continue. I packed up my notes and turned to leave the stage. Denzel silently followed behind me.
It's raining outside, let me give you a ride.
The rain was pouring down like a waterfall. I thought for 3 seconds and decided not to inconvenience myself. When I got into Denzel's Rolls-Royce, I glanced sideways and saw a hint of hidden joy in his eyes. But when I took out my phone, I realized that the events of the press conference had already been broadcasted live. It was trending online. Under several topics, netizens were arguing fiercely. So Georgia took credit for the reporter's achievements? How shameless! What do you mean took credit? That woman who climbed up through underhanded methods, who knows who's lying? The nude photos have been verified as photoshopped. Even if that was real, she was just doing her job from the beginning. The job's done, she took the money. What's there to feel wronged about? Am I the only one who thinks Denzel Tilney is pitiful? Neither of the two women are any good, both deceived him. Suddenly, I felt a lump in my throat. I hurriedly turned off my phone and looked out. Raindrops trickled down the window like tiny rivers, blurring the rapidly retreating lights outside into a mix of chaotic colors. Compared to 3 years ago, the scenery of the city hadn't changed at all. But between Denzel and me, everything had turned upside down. Back then, the Tilney family invited the most renowned experts. After 2 surgeries, Denzel finally regained his sight. The bodyguards Georgia hired at a high price guarded me every day, fearing I would see Denzel and reveal the truth. However, on the day he regained his sight, they brought me to the hospital voluntarily. Through the hospital room door, I couldn't see Denzel, but I could hear his insecure voice.
Georgia.
Denzel, I'm here.
Georgia said softly.
I was really worried about you.
Her deliberately altered voice was almost identical to mine. Denzel didn't notice anything strange. He just spoke a bit unhappily.
You said that when I regain my sight, you would be the first person I see. You broke your promise.
I didn't listen to the rest. The sudden intense pain in my heart almost swallowed me whole. From the beginning, in Denzel's world, the person who had been with him for those 2 years was Georgia Horler. Not me. Not Aileen Swales. Georgia's bodyguards dragged me into a nearby lounge. Soon, she walked in, her high heels clicking. Her makeup was as exquisite as ever. Only her lipstick was smudged.
It was Denzel who kissed me. He really loves me and can't live without me,
she said slowly while touching up her makeup.
You've taken good care of him these 2 years. But to him, all of this was done by me. Someone like you, with such a lowly status, will never ever have anything to do with him.
Where are you going? Home.
Denzel's voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts. I lowered my head slightly.
Can you please drop me off at the company, Mr. Tilney? I still have some work to handle.
But he didn't start the car. Instead, he placed one hand on the steering wheel and leaned over. He looked somewhat sad.
Aileen, do you have to call me that so formally?
His familiar scent was right in front of me. Mixed with the fresh smell of rain, it wrapped around me. It almost dragged me back into countless past memories. At this moment, I suddenly didn't want to endure it anymore. I pushed him away and looked at him coldly.
What else should I call you? Young Master or Denzel Tilney? Do you want to shout Georgia's name at me again, as you did 3 years ago when I was injured protecting you?
He suddenly fell silent.
Those 2 years are over. The one who was engaged to you was Georgia all along. Your life is back on track, so why are you still entangling with me?
But this isn't my track.
Denzel looked at me, his eyes gradually reddening.
I had never seen Georgia before. From the beginning, the only one I recognized was you.
A deep pain surged from my heart. I closed my eyes, and when I opened my mouth, my voice trembled uncontrollably.
You're still lying to me. Denzel, the day you regained your sight, I was outside the hospital room. I heard you mistake Georgia for me without any doubt. You hugged her, kissed her.
He suddenly interrupted me.
I didn't. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew she wasn't you.
I was suddenly stunned. I heard Denzel's seemingly calm voice.
The Tilney family's situation is very complicated. In that hospital room that day, there was more than one person with malicious intent who wanted to kill me. So the moment I realized she wasn't you, I made a decision. Georgia was the best, the perfect target.
He curled his lips slightly, and a sharp smile appeared in his eyes.
She likes to impersonate others, doesn't she? Then let her do it to the fullest.
Suddenly, images from some news reports flashed through my mind. I saw them while studying abroad. They said Georgia encountered a real explosion while filming, nearly losing her life in the fire. They also said she was injured by a huge billboard while traveling with Denzel, almost risking her life.
I didn't intentionally fail to recognize you. A lot happened in these 3 years. After Grandpa passed away, one Tilney family member after another came out, trying to kill me. But now they're either in prison or dead. This even includes my biological mother. In fact, I'm not afraid of dying. When my cousin was forced to give up all his shares and stabbed me in a frenzy, I didn't feel any pain. In that moment, I just missed you.
The parking lot was silent. Under the dim car lights, he took off his suit and unbuttoned his white shirt one by one, revealing the scar near his heart.
The Tilney family is too chaotic, it's not easy to control. But it doesn't matter. After today, Georgia and the last forces supporting her should fall too. The entire Tilney family, including myself, can be yours.
He leaned closer bit by bit, gazing at me from a close distance. In the past, those eyes were always gray and unfocused. Now they were bright, like stars holding the entire universe. I swallowed and said softly,
But you and Georgia.
I never kissed her, never.
He slightly emphasized his tone.
I'm clean, you can check for yourself.
Just this one sentence, and the rational string in my mind snapped completely. As I rushed over and tore open his collar, countless passionate memories surged into my heart. His lowest point was also the most turbulent and helpless 2 years of my life. Those reckless and uncontrollable emotions. In the end, they all turned into our passionate entanglement. On the reclined car seat, I grabbed the tie around Denzel's bare neck, just like countless moments of intimacy after arguments in the past. I pulled it tight, tightening it. In the slight feeling of suffocation, Denzel squinted his eyes, letting out a comfortable sigh.
I missed you so much.
He held me, burying his face in my neck, his hot palm rubbing my waist.
They are so stupid. How could such an obedient and compliant vase be you? No one can ever play your role.
His previously cold and sharp voice was now filled with desire. By the time the storm passed, it was already late at night. Denzel drove to a villa. The slightly disheveled tie still hung around his neck, marked with red. I took out my phone and saw a news headline with a prominent breaking tag. #Georgia Horler taken for investigation.
Last month, my half-brother contacted her, threatening to reveal her secrets unless she stole the bid documents and other confidential files from me.
I was silent for a moment and then said softly,
I know.
You know?
Denzel suddenly turned his head.
Did you arrange it, Aileen?
I nodded, pinching my palm to force myself to look at him.
I came back this time to destroy the Horler family, to ruin Georgia, and to overturn the case from 20 years ago when the Horler family slandered my mother. For this result, I can pay any price.
I work in media, and this is the most important reason. 20 years ago, because she fancied my dad, the young Miss Horler set up a trap to frame my mom, accusing her of being a prostitute. And young Georgia, to live a life of luxury, helped outsiders. She personally pushed her own mother into the abyss. My mom was detained for 15 days and lost her job. When she returned home, all the neighbors pointed fingers at her, sympathizing with my dad. After my parents divorced, my mom, bearing such a humiliating reputation, took me and returned to the countryside in disgrace. She was depressed and died of illness just past 50. The day she died, the hospital TV was broadcasting news about the Horler family. They said the Horler couple were loving, and their children were excellent, a model among wealthy families.
How ridiculous! When my mom died, she weighed less than 70 pounds, her hands covered with bruises from needles. She could have lived a long life. The Horler family's business is dirty, they've harmed so many people, and they dare call themselves a model?
I covered my eyes, forcing back the tears.
Denzel, I used you because I knew you wouldn't let those who betrayed you go, so I had her deliberately violate your taboos. If you feel hurt and resent me for it, that's fine, but I must personally send her to hell.
I suppressed all my emotions, trying to look at him as calmly as possible.
Then why your hand is trembling?
Denzel grabbed my trembling hand behind my back, carefully bringing it to his lips and kissing it.
Don't be afraid. I'm glad you used me because it means you have me in your heart. Of course, I'll stand by your side. I said, the entire Tilney family, including myself, is yours.
The news about Georgia being taken away for investigation was trending hotly for 3 days. The Horler family wanted to suppress the public opinion, so they sought help from Denzel. He sat behind his desk, listened to their request, and smiled.
What you said is very touching. But how to decide this matter? Sorry, it has to be up to my fiancé.
My father, with his wealthy wife, turned to see me. Their faces changed immediately. I smiled at them slightly.
Consider the consequences you will have to face.
Because soon, you will be just like her. Denzel held a press conference to clarify his relationship with Georgia. When faced with questions, he smiled faintly.
Fiancé? I never admitted it was her. I've always referred to the one who took care of me back then.
Someone asked.
But didn't she only take care of you because she received money from Georgia?
Denzel's lips still held a smile, but his eyes turned cold inch by inch.
Sir, I advise you to speak carefully. There are many wealthy people in this world. Why would she only take money to take care of me? Isn't it because she loves me?
The reporter fell silent. Sitting next to him, I also fell silent. After this press conference ended, I released the recordings from when she came to find me years ago.
A blind man, and a wealthy family's abandoned child, who would want to take care of him?
She only took care of me for a few days. She's dead now. Why should I give her money? Do you want to keep me here, living a poor, miserable life like you, unable to afford even a burial plot?
Public opinion was in an uproar.
No way! I always thought she had the image of an elegant and generous actress.
So she and Aileen Swales are biological sisters, and she voluntarily found someone to replace her.
Her entire outfit costs over $1 million, and she won't even pay for her own mother's burial plot? How disgusting.
Riding the wave of this rampant public opinion, I started a live broadcast. In front of millions, I revealed the truth from 20 years ago.
The eldest daughter of the Horler family, Calla Horler, fancied my father. They refused to speak clearly and divorced my mom just like that. They insisted on conspiring together to frame my mother, forcing her to bear a disgraceful reputation and live the rest of her life in shame.
Standing behind me was a shrunken man with a buzz cut. During my graduate studies and internship, I inquired everywhere and put in great effort. I finally found this man's whereabouts through a senior colleague. He had a habit of petty theft and had been in and out of prison several times.
The incident back then was instigated by Calla Horler, and Miss Swales was indeed innocent. She was tricked by her own daughter, Georgia, into going to a party at the Horler family, got drunk, and I helped her to a room and stuffed money under the pillow.
Calla Horler had someone report it to the police in advance. Before my mother, who had been deliberately intoxicated, could sober up, the door was pushed open by the police conducting the anti-vice raid.
Even now, it's easy to frame a woman, spread pornographic rumors, and label her a whore. Especially in those times. I majored in media studies and work in the media industry, not just for this case. I will dedicate my life to clearing the names of all the girls who have been wronged and defamed.
This live broadcast added the final blow to the downfall of the Horler family. From the start, their means of gaining wealth were not clean. Now, amid a period of strict investigation, they were caught red-handed.
It was never me supporting them, but my good half-brother.
Denzel said.
I only have some collaboration with them on the project, but I can withdraw at any time, so you don't need to worry about it affecting me.
I finally felt relieved. I submitted all the evidence I had collected over the years to the police. Thanks to Denzel's clean break with those people after taking over the Tilney family, he was not implicated. On the day the Horler family was completely destroyed, I brought a bouquet of flowers and took Denzel to the cemetery to visit my mother. The smile in the photo on her tombstone was still so gentle, but always carried a trace of sadness. She was a kind and gentle woman, and she genuinely loved my father. And because of this, she never got over it all these years.
Before she died, lying on her sickbed, she held my hand and told me not to blame Georgia. She said, "Your sister is not the biological child of the Horler family. She must have had a hard time there."
She didn't know. All these years, Georgia had been relying on belittling and humiliating her to gain favor with Calla Horler and gradually establish herself in the Horler family. From the day she was brought into the Horler family, she began to decay. I gently traced the photo on the tombstone with my fingertips.
"Mom, no one will ever think you were wrong about that incident again. I now have a great career and a boyfriend."
Denzel stood aside and corrected me in a low voice.
Fiancé.
"All right, fiancé."
I instinctively turned the silver ring on my left ring finger, which matched with Denzel's. After going abroad back then, I had hidden it at the bottom of a box. I thought I would never have the chance to wear it again in this lifetime. I arranged the bouquet in front of the tombstone, stood up, and bowed. Turning around, Denzel was gazing at me.
Aileen, go wait for me in the car outside. I want to talk to your mom alone for a while.
The autumn night was cool. I waited in the car for a long time before I saw Denzel return. His black coat was covered with dew, making his facial features even more defined. I turned my face and asked him.
"What did you say to my mom?"
He started the car. After a long pause, he finally said,
I just said, thank you for bringing Aileen into this world. Otherwise, I would have died at my lowest point in life, 5 summers ago.
When everything settled down, I successfully got a permanent position and even got a small promotion. I started to take on interview tasks independently. It was a high school girl who had been bullied by wealthy students at her school for over a year. She jumped off the school rooftop.
Those people have money and power, no one can afford to offend them.
My boss looked at me, hesitant to speak.
If you don't want to go.
"Of course, I want to go."
I took the file.
"Coincidentally, I'm working on a plan for an advocacy event related to bullying. I'll send it to you this afternoon for review."
Rarely, Denzel is now rich and powerful. I rely on him, so I must take advantage of it. This interview, along with the subsequent anti-bullying campaign planning, kept me busy for half a month. I hardly saw Denzel during that time. He would send me 20 messages, and I would only have time to reply with an emoji in between bites of bread while monitoring public opinion. That night, he said he had prepared a surprise for me and insisted I come home. I pushed open the door. The night sky was filled with twinkling stars. In the steamy room, he propped himself up on the bed, panting like a puppy as he looked at me. His gaze was sticky, lingering on me.
Aileen, you've been neglecting me for so long.
I stared at him for a long time, so long that even the decisive Mr. Tilney's ears turned red, before I took off my camera strap and threw it to him.
"Tie it yourself."
Because I had been out all day, my voice was very hoarse.
"I'll go take a shower first."
Denzel was very obedient. When I came out, drying my wet hair, he had already arranged everything. Only a small lamp was left on by the bedside, and the moonlight flowed in like melted ice water. Even so, it still couldn't cool down the steamy heat in the room.
Aileen, kiss me. You're too tense. Let me relax a bit.
Every word, every sentence, mixed with his eyes full of a romantic hue. All of it was full of seductive meaning. When the storm finally ceased, it was already the latter half of the night with dawn breaking. I suddenly remembered something.
"Next month, I have to go on a business trip. There's a very important interview, a new story about a little girl in a mountainous area who has been collectively abused by the villagers for a long time. She walked alone in the mountains all night before reaching an internet cafe in the town to contact me. That place is quite backward, and the local forces are deeply rooted. It might be hard to penetrate, so I'll stay there for a while."
His hand tightened on the protruding bones of my back.
It will be dangerous.
"Then so be it."
I didn't care much, turned over and sat up. Seeing him staring at me intently, I comforted him with a few words.
"I'll do my best to protect myself. But this kind of thing is the mission and duty of us media workers."
Denzel was silent for a moment. Suddenly he said,
I'll go with you.
"But don't you have a very important contract to discuss next week?"
It can be postponed.
Why? Actually, there's no need.
I tried to reason with him, but the rest of my words were swallowed by Denzel's passionate kiss. That kiss traveled down and stopped at my most sensitive neck, breathing wetly. He said in a hoarse voice,
Because I am your most loyal guardian. You just go and pursue your dreams, I'll be there to protect you.